In a healthy individual, if you were to stroke the lateral part of your foot, the sole of their foot, and make your way upwards, you'd find flexion of all five of their toes downwards, or at least these toes downwards. However, as you make your way to the big toe, that is the ball of the big toe, directly inferior to it, you'd find that the big toe dorsiflexes instead. This is the normal response. The reason for this is that there are various nociceptive fields on the sole of the foot. The nociceptive field for the big toe lies directly inferior to it. That is the ball of the big toe. So stroking its field would send a noxious stimulus up the nerve that supplies it, which would then carry the stimulus to the corticospinal tract. Let's call it A for our purposes. This corticospinal tract would then send its response back down to a muscle called the extensor hallucis longus, which then directs its effect onto the big toe by causing it to bend outwards. So this is the normal response. The nociceptive field for the other toes lie within this region. So any noxious stimulus present here would send noxious stimulus up the nerve that supplies this region, a different nerve compared to the one here. So let's call this nerve B, which sends signals up corticospinal tract B. This response, the response of the corticospinal tract B, would be to activate the plantar flexes, the flexes of all its toes, thus causing them to bend downwards. Okay. Evolutionarily speaking, this could be very effective in reducing the exposure of the feet to a noxious stimulus, and thus effectively reducing the extent of the injury. Now, let's say a person has defect in corticospinal tract A. What this would mean is that as you stroke their foot laterally from this point onwards, upwards, you'd find that here these toes would bend downwards normally. There will be normal plantar flexion of the four toes. However, as you make your way and stroke the ball of the foot of the big toe, you'd find that this big toe would flex downwards, plantar flex, instead of dorsiflex. The reason for this is that there is already a damage down the nervous response. So there's, technically speaking, there's a void of muscular response. So this tract would take over, and thus the normal plantar response from these toes would extend to act on the big toe as well, causing it to flex downwards. The extensor hallucis longus in this case is overpowered by the plantar flexes. Let's say there's a defect in corticospinal tract B. What you would expect to find is, as you stroke the person's foot laterally upwards, you would find that these toes do not flex downwards. Instead, they fan upwards. There is fanning of all the toes. Alright, this would suggest that there is a defect along the nerve that carries the noxious stimulus and the effective response. Okay. There's a theory that suggests that let's say there is a defect in corticospinal tract A causing plantar flexion of the big toe. Now, if only this is affected, and let's say you were to go up in a person with a corticospinal tract A defect, and if you were to stroke the lateral part of the foot and make your way upwards, and notice that this part is normal but only this part is with an aberrant response, then there's only a defect along this pathway. But if you stroke the person's foot upwards and notice that there is fanning of these toes as well, it suggests that the lesion in corticospinal tract A has spread to corticospinal tract B. Again, A and B are just for our own purposes. I don't know what these tracts are specifically called, but that is the theory. That is the rationale behind the Babinski and the plantar reflexes. So technically, a Babinski response or Babinski reflex is when there is it only involves the flexion or dorsiflexion of the big toe. If there is a negative plantar flexion, meaning there is fanning of the big toe of the other toes, it suggests that there is more than just one lesion and that it is of a higher severity.